Hello. Before we start this week's episode, Adam has got an important statement to read because of an unguarded and unwarranted statement that some of you followers might have heard at the end of the last episode. Adam.
Some of our followers may have noticed that at the end of last week's podcast, I made a number of unfounded statements regarding the respective abilities of the England and Republic of Ireland football teams. After careful consideration and a frank exchange of views with Jack, I have come to the realisation that any suggestion that England are in any way superior to Ireland in terms of footballing capabilities is entirely erroneous, borderline malicious, and certainly the product of a momentary lapse into confusion. I would like to thank Jack for helping me to see the error of my ways, and I would also like to apologise to all our followers, to the Irish nation in general, and in particular to Jack's mum, for the harm that this egregious misinformation may have caused them to suffer. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa.
Thank you, Adam. Very unfortunate, but entirely necessary, I'm afraid. And the contents of this envelope, well, I'm putting away for safekeeping, Adam, in case we have any more of your Sassenach nonsense. And if we do, contents will be revealed to our followers. So thank you. That be a warning to you.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Fast Football and Philosophy with me, Dr. Adam Foxon.
And me, Professor Jack Cunningham.
And this is the podcast that combines football and philosophy, and we are guaranteed to make you the smartest in the pub. And we'll hear no more about it, Jack. Thank you very much. Last week we were discussing Friedrich Nietzsche and Arsenal's plight of always being second. What do you think, Jack? Are they going to become the Übermensch that they need to become to win the league, or are they going to fail at the last?
Yeah, I think they are, Adam. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not a betting man, but I think they are. I think they're looking like they're pretty solid, and like we said last week, you know, the expectations of previous experiences, it's not rock solid evidence that the same thing is going to happen again. So I think we have to be healthily skeptical about previous happenings with regard to any particular team. So I'm looking at this Arsenal team, and I think they're pretty solid. It's good though. It's good that they're not romping it. It's good that we've got the narrative is still there in terms of the season, isn't it?
I'm glad that you mentioned that word narrative, Jack, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. So today's episode, we said that we were going to talk about the idea of nationalism and patriotism and imagined communities, but I don't know what we mean by imagined communities. What does that actually mean to people? What's the philosophy behind it?
Okay, yeah. So this comes from a political scientist and philosopher and commentator, Marxist, called Benedict Anderson, and he wrote in 1983 a book called Imagined Communities. He's well placed to write about nationalism. This is a guy who was born in China. His mum's English, his dad's Irish. He lives all over the world. He goes to Eton and Oxford, and then he becomes a Marxist, which by its very philosophical nature is an internationalist. So very, very qualified to speak on this matter. And his book in 1983 is probably the most read book about nationalism in the history of the English language. He says something really interesting. Okay, he says. Imagine communities. Nationalism is nationhood. This idea of a nation is surprisingly new. And a lot of people think that this goes back to, like, William the Conqueror. It is a surprisingly new phenomenon. Up until the Middle Ages, it was much more like what we talked about before, where you'd have corporeity within a small community, and you wouldn't really, the idea that you're English or French or Spanish would be pretty much irrelevant to you. Okay, but the imagined community emerges at the Industrial Revolution, and it emerges because of three main things. One of them is that we don't believe in divine right monarchy anymore. Okay, so this thing that's England isn't something that's imposed on us from above. And I'm only using England as an example here. England now becomes a national consciousness, but it is imagined. It is in the head. The other thing that happened as well was revolution and the Enlightenment And the idea that comes from this period as well, that vernacular languages, English, Swedish, German, French, is just as good a language as Latin or Greek. This is revolutionary in terms of intellectual history. We thought that something like the English language was all right for buying a pig in the market or for having a chat down the pub, but you couldn't write in it. You couldn't write a beautiful sonnet or an amazing play or anything intellectual because the vocabulary wasn't there. But we get in the Enlightenment, the vocabulary of English and these vernacular languages develops. So this is highly, highly important to the development of the imagination.
Just quickly, and I think that still kind of exists now, right? So like lots of our fancy words aren't words that you would necessarily think are English. They kind of sound a bit French, or they sound a bit like Italian, that kind of thing. That they sound a bit continental, and that's kind of why we associate them with poshness and things, isn't it?
Yeah. The English language is probably the most prevalent language at doing this. It's a magpie language. It just steals and steals from all over the world, and it is one of the reasons why. It's one of the reasons why it's highly successful and very, very beautiful language, is because it just has been it's been taking language words from everywhere. That you go to a country and you discover the Inuit and you say, well, what's that you're wearing? And he says, a parka. All right, we'll have that.
And he's really from Manchester.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the imagined community is in your head. And even if you live in a small nation, you're never going to really be part of a community. You're never going to speak to most other people. You're never going to meet most other people. But you imagine that you have this thing in your head, which is a shared idea of identity, of common values, of a common history. It's all in your head, though. But that doesn't matter because things that are in your head are real as well. Okay, and you can kind of you can get this. Let me give you this kind of thought experiment, Adam. You're on the border in a forest between Spain and France, right? And there's the border, and you kind of straddle it, 1 foot in Spain and 1 foot in France, and you say, this is unbelievable because my 2 feet are in different countries. And then the nonsense of that it becomes very apparent. They're not in anywhere different. They're in the same place. But yet, if I told you that France doesn't exist, it's just in your imagination, you would quite obviously be able to say to me, no, it really does. It's just a thing that we have imagined. So that's what an imagined community is. You will not speak to the vast majority of English people, but print culture comes along, and that means you can communicate with them. And he talks about the newspaper as being this mass ceremony where you all read the paper, the same stories, the same the same commentary on politics, on global issues, and that becomes a shared identity as well. You won't meet these people, but you feel like you belong because the person in Aberystwyth or Carlisle or Cornwall is reading the same stuff that you're reading, and clocks and calendars are all standardized now, so that we're not all going by the village clock and we're all over the place. We're all moving to the same time on the same date, and that creates this imagined community. Incidentally, that idea that you live, no matter how small the country is, that you won't meet or know every other citizen, well, I met living proof actually that that's not always true. I had a brother-in-law, the legendary Ollie Horgan, who sadly passed away last year. He was the assistant manager of Galway United, right? Let me tell you this, Adam. I went to the pub with Ollie quite a bit, from Donegal to Cork. I never ever once went into a pub when somebody didn't know Ollie Horgan. I swear to God, it was unbelievable. It was a challenge. Sometimes you would almost be tempted to take him to the remotest pub on the far-fetched island off the coast of Connemara or something. He would walk into a pub. I bet you if I took him there, and at least one person would know him. He was a legend. So these imagined communities, that's normally the rule, that we don't know these people, but we're in community with them. But there are exceptions to it.
And I guess this is how we account for, because when we're talking about an imagined community here, we're talking about kind of a national community, but actually this could apply to any kind of community. So it could be that you're a gamer, and you speak and you kind of create your own kind of way of talking to people, like, and you might have a shared sense of humor that have frames of reference that only you gamers understand, and so you can kind of have like really, really large imagined communities, and then you can have really, really small ones, what we might call a subculture, but they're all imagined communities with all these kind of imagined similarities and contrasts, I suppose. And that's kind of how we can kind of have, the same sense of humor and, these kinds of things. Yeah, that makes a lot.
The idea, he's writing in 1983. He updates his book in 2006, but I think he is his idea is being challenged now, or maybe even eroded by the internationalization of the internet. We talk to people in a lot of different places now, whereas in the past we didn't. We tended to speak to people, in our own nations, and so that would really cement this idea that this is who we are. But yeah, if you're a gamer now, your gaming community is spread across the globe, and so yeah, it's an imagined community, but it's not national anymore.
So this perfectly encapsulates everything that we want to discuss in terms of football and national identity, because there are so many football players who don't play for the country in which they live.
Yeah.
Because actually, the community that they feel most kind of connected to in some kind of emotional capacity might actually be, if you're English but your granddad's Irish, and you spent all your summers in Ireland, and that's where all your best memories are, and that's who you connect best with, and that's kind of how you see yourself as Irish, as opposed to being English, just because you were born there and had 5 years of education there according to the FIFA stipulations, then then actually, of course you're going to play for Ireland. Of course you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Because
having said that, Adam, in 1991 in the European Championship, Ireland thrashed England 1-1. And 11 minutes before the whistle was blown, Tony Cascarino heads the ball into the net and equalises, right? So later on, we're all very pleased with this. He hasn't got a very Irish-sounding name, has he? But apparently his granny or somebody was Irish, and so we'll have him. It's great. He writes his autobiography maybe a decade after this, and he said he made it up. There was no Irish connection in his family at all. So it kind of challenged your idea of, this national thing. We better be a smidgen more careful about it, hadn't we? Although we do take the victory of that draw. We still cherish the memory of
I think that's a bit of a well-trodden path, to be honest with you, because I'm sure, and I cannot remember the player's name, but it's ringing a really, really distant bell for me. But I remember hearing an interview with an ex-footballer who was saying again that he'd qualified to play for Ireland because he told the Irish manager it was someone quite big. Was it someone who played for Liverpool? Who was it?
John Aldridge?
It might have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, essentially, he basically said, "Yeah, no, I'm for definite. Like, I've lost contact with him now, but he's definitely Irish. So they basically put down some random bloke's name who had the same surname as him and was about the right age for his granddad to say that. Yeah, that's his granddad. So some random Irish guys in a pub somewhere thinking,
that's my grandson. On the other hand, if you live in a country like Ireland, a lot of our children have to leave and get jobs elsewhere, and it doesn't make them less Irish. But it's hard to get together football teams in Ireland now, local football teams and GAA teams, because the young lads are off to Australia, but they're no less Irish. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to say that you can't play for your national team, especially from a country like that. And it's the opposite is true. I went to university with people who were born in India and Singapore and Malaysia because their parents worked for the army or for the government, and they went to school in England, and they weren't Malaysian or Singaporean or or Indian. They were as English could be. And, the idea that, oh, no, you were born in Calcutta, weren't you? You can't play. It's not, that doesn't make any sense.
But like, so, and that kind of thing relates back to that footballer that I was telling you about, Lyle Taylor, who I'm sure there's plenty of examples of this, but he was born in England. I can't remember where. Was a pretty good footballer. He managed to get into the Premier League. I don't think he actually made a Premier League appearance. But he was a good footballer, and he, because of his dad, I think, played for Montserrat. But he had to get like 3 connecting flights, one from Barbados, and then to Antigua, and then from Antigua to Montserrat. But that's where we spent. That's terrible. What a career! Actually, so when he was at Charlton, his manager was Lee Bowyer, and he managed to get he basically helped Lee Bowyer, this quite famous footballer who played for Newcastle and things, managed to get him the job of manager of Montserrat. Imagine that. What a way to end your career as football is to see I'm going to go being a manager of Montserrat. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of I don't know if he's still the manager of Jamaica. He was last year. Steve McLaren. Imagine that, the Wally with a brolly. Don't need a brolly anymore. He's just there in Jamaica.
He's the brolly to keep the sun off his head now.
To be fair, actually, yeah, it's probably not a bad shout. But I guess on the flip side of this, we can re-invoke Hobbes, because Hobbes would say, Hobbes might bring in the social contract again, and say, okay, so let's say you were born in England, right? And you're good enough to play for England. I don't know, say Ademola Lookman, right? He doesn't play. He doesn't play for England, but he's good enough to. He's a very, very good player. He could potentially challenge for an England spot. Now, he's lived his life in England, grown up in England, gone through English schooling, worked with English football clubs, all the way up until I think I can't remember where he's at now. He's somewhere in Italy, right? Hobbes might say, really, you should show the loyalty to the sovereign who has provided you with the security and all of the kind of the subsequent amenities that have allowed you to prosper into the football player that you are now. And so you can't just go away and use those talents that have been developed through the security of the social contract that you've given to the sovereign of England. Yeah. It's the government or whatever it might be, right? I mean, obviously it would probably be the actual king, but it's not really anymore. And then go away and play for another international team. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Because we're the ones. Oh, it sounds like shit, but like we're the ones who made you. Like as in England. England is the one that made them. What do you think?
No, I think that's exactly right. That is one of the philosophical arguments that are attached to this whole thing. Is it where you're born or where you were formed as a footballer that's most important? And what you're saying there, I think, is that Hobbes would say it's where you're formed. Like, we don't care whether you're born in the Antarctic. Where you are formed as a footballer, where did you pick up your skills? Where did you but still, that is and that goes without saying. Yeah, of course they should. You only have to look at the amount of players who played for England who were born elsewhere, like Raheem Sterling, John Barnes, Owen Hargreaves, Terry Butcher, Wilfried Zaha. It's and your favourite Matt Le Tissier, not English, nor is Maya Le Tissier. So these things. There is an argument to be made against this whole idea as well, and it is for local talent and developing nations as well. Does this squeeze out local talent? Do we kind of we get a player like John Barnes from Jamaica, although he was I think about 7 when he arrived in England, but still we took him from another country, and that means that a local person didn't get a place in that squad. And you got to you can say, is that fair? Also, it denudes developing countries that are on as wealthy as other countries of their best players. Their best players go and play in a wealthier country, and how would you get a national team together in a country with limited resources if you're as soon as you develop a great player, they're stolen from underneath you.
There's quite a few. For instance, there's quite a few Polish players who have chosen to play for Germany, because Germany I'm going to say it again. I'm probably going to owe Germany an apology. They're just an objectively better footballing nation. They've won more things. They've got a better squad of players. I'm sure it happens. The world over, players will choose to play for a better team, even though they've come from a much smaller nation or developing nation, because they've got much more. France, mainly because of its colonial past, has all these ties to so many African countries, and so many African players choose to play for France because they can through whatever grandparents they have that qualified as French back in the day. Now they play for France because France have got a much better chance of winning the World Cup, and do win the World Cups. With a majority African descendant playing base.
Yeah. And look at that. Like, I mean, if you were born in a tiny country, imagine you were a really amazing football lad and you were born in San Marino. Who are you going to play for?
What do you mean imagine?
Actually, I reckon you would get a game for if you went over to San Marino and lived there for 5 years.
I'm not sure.
Maybe that horse is bolted by now. But worth considering, the teenage you should have considered a move to Andorra or San Marino. The Vatican City.
The Vatican, I'd definitely play. So the Vatican City, actually, they've played a couple of games, but they only ever played testimonials. They never play or like exhibition games. Really, they're exhibition games. Yeah. They never play official kind of competitive games. No.
I heard they're really dirty.
Well, God's on their side, Jack. Why wouldn't they be? I remember actually, so there's quite a big kind of church organisation where we are in Lincoln, and one of the leaders, he invited me to play some football, and so I was playing footy with him. He used to come into our school and do some bits and pieces, and I've knocked the ball out of play right off him. So it's a goal kick, and I've gone to pick up the ball, and he's gone to take it off me to take a corner. I said, Dan, it's a goal kick, and he goes, Foxy, come on, mate. I'm a Christian. I don't lie. I just thought, that's not true.
What he really meant was, I'm a Christian. My lies aren't lies. That's a different thing.
It's a different thing. But yeah, I think actually on the flip side of that, lots of players who are born here choose to play for their imagined community elsewhere. So Erling Haaland, born in Leeds, massive Leeds fan, loves England by all accounts. Absolutely not. He's playing for Norway, and there's nothing else that he can say about that. Jamal Musiala, he again born in England, could definitely have got in our squad because he's an amazing football player. Plays for Germany, and so. I'm not saying that Germany are a smaller nation than we are in terms of football, but they're at least competing. Like we're at a level. So why not stay in the country that gave him the social contract? Well, it's because actually it might be for all sorts of reasons, but potentially it might be that he sees his community, his imagined community, as closer to being in Germany.
Yeah.
I think he lives in Germany right now. Actually, I think he plays for Bayern Munich. So, it makes sense. This makes sense. So I think it's a really good question for us to ask the listeners. Where do you think you should play your football? If you were a great football player and you'd grown up in England, but you had grandparents elsewhere and you were able to qualify for another country, would you stay loyal to England, or would you want to play for another country that either is a developing nation or has more of a chance to win the World Cup?
Yeah, And the other question is, as well, attached to that, is if you were in charge of the FA, what would your rules be? What would you say
Oh, yeah.
qualifies you to play for the English national, or any, if you're in charge of any national footballing association, what would you do? Would you send
Probably.
scouts out around Africa just to kind of look at these up and coming players and
Yeah.
just think, yeah, let's harvest these people because.
Why
Or would you
not?
just, or would you be a real stickler and say, no, 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 for authenticity's sake, we've got to have some very strict rules about this?
Because we have those kinds of rules in the Premier League anyway. So we have lots of rules in the Premier League that stop there from being too much of an influx of foreign players coming over here and doing their stuff. Um, so I don't know what the actual rules are, but it's something like you have to have it's something like 8 or 9. It might be more actually. Homegrown players that are kind of registered in your squad, your overall squad. Um, and homegrown means that they've been resident in England for at least 5 years. I
Yeah.
think I think that's it.
The
And I think
same with the FA. You've got to be resident for over the age of 18.
yeah,
So you couldn't pick up like a 13-year-old player from the Ivory Coast and house them in Manchester, and when they're 18, it can't be that. You've got to
yeah.
be over 18,
So do we
and
have
then your
to so do
five
we have
years
to
start.
change the rules? Do we have to to harvest all that talent elsewhere? In South America, are we going out there and
Yeah,
getting some wonder kids
yeah, yeah.
from I don't know I don't know Brazil,
Well,
Argentina?
there might be kind of football anarchists out there who say there should be no rules. You should play for whoever you want to play for. If you do do you love Australia? I've never been to Australia. Go and play for them. You're good enough. I mean, that's you could make an argument for that. Yeah, I just want to. I want to go and live in that country. Why can't I play for them?
I quite like that as a rule.
Well, you've always been a little bit of an anarchist, Adam.
Educate me so. Educate me, Dave. Oh no, that's nice. I like that a lot. What are we going to talk about next week, Jack?
We did mention this, didn't we? It's narrative, Adam.
Narrative,
Narrative
of
and
course. Yeah,
momentum.
we kind of foreshadowed it at the start, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I went with a couple of colleagues to the Lincoln game against Blackpool, and one of them was talking to me about momentum and how momentum builds because Lincoln are on a real run at the moment.
Yeah, shout
Um,
out to
I
Lincoln.
think they're 17 games unbeaten now. Something like 10 points clear of the playoffs. Like surely bound to the championship.
Yeah,
Um,
Adam, I was in the pub though the other day, and there's a group of guys on the next table, and their conversation went along the lines of this: "Yeah, we're going up next season, but only for a season." And they all kind of nodded and agreed. And you thought that attitude,
that's
mate,
so
does not help.
pessimistic. No, that's so pessimistic. We have a new American owner now as well, or like a majority shareholder. So hopefully he can bring in some cash as well. So yeah, things are looking up. But again, we were talking about this idea of a narrative because I remember before we even got to that game, we were saying we are not going to lose this game. Like there's just far too much momentum in Lincoln's favour now. The narrative is being built. And it's not just about those kinds of long drawn out narratives. People always talk about the narrative in like individual games. It might be that and I gave you that example where let's say that West Ham are struggling for survival and they buy a player or they loan a player from Chelsea and he's eligible to play against his parent club. And on the last day of the season, West Ham need a point to survive. And who's their last game? It's Chelsea. And who scores that equaliser? It's the Chelsea player. And it's proper bomb.
I'm on the edge of my chair, Adam, as you're speaking.
I'm just a natural born storyteller, Jack. Well, I'm not stuttering all over the place. And that's kind of the point. Is that there's these kinds of narratives so much in football because there are so many individual identities that are always clashing.
Yeah,
And I think we
yeah.
can talk about that. I think we can
We'll
do
have a
that
good chat about that
next
next
week.
week, Adam.
Yeah, nice. Perfect. Well, we've hit the half an hour mark again, Jack, and as I say, we never want to get past that. So
Yep.
it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
Bye bye.